and thanks for joining me. Hi folks, welcome to the webinar and thanks for joining me. It's Andrew Huffer here. Today I'm going to walk you through the 7 steps to developing an effective presentation. If you can stick with me for the next 29 minutes, we're going to go through the whole design process for you to develop an effective presentation. This will ensure that you have a stronger handle on making sure your messages are clearly and confidently presented, that you have the methods to fully engage attendees, and that you can further develop your core presentation skills. So why am I presenting? Well, picture this. It's 2007. I'm in the Shire Hall at a place called Gascoyne Junction in Western Australia. It's 200 kilometres from the nearest town, which is Carnarvon, and over 1,000 kilometres from Perth, where I live. It's 8 o'clock at night, and I'm doing a presentation and workshop to a group of pastoralists about the development of a natural resource management strategy. These guys are sceptical. They don't know me, and they have no good reason to trust me or what I'm telling them. They're big, scary guys who spend a lot of time on their own in the middle of nowhere. And there I am, desperately trying to get my message through. After a question and answer session, I asked the group, are we happy to move on? And then it happens. One 6'4", 20-stone bloke stands up, points at me, and he says, mate, I'm not even frigging happy to be here, so just frigging get on with it. Okay, this is a bit awkward. So I just frigging get on with it and make it through to the end of the presentation with my life constantly flashing before this guy's eyes. Because at this moment, I knew that I had to really improve my presentation skills. And this may be melodramatic to say my life depended on it, but my livelihood does. And to some degree, so does yours. Why? Because we both need to provide clear and compelling reasons for the people that fund, contract, or employ us to keep doing so. So, we're ready to go. Before I jump into content, we've got a few more people still joining us, so welcome aboard. I want to talk a bit more about you. Now, I can't say that I've become a convert just yet to the revitalised form of Family Feud, but we do have one thing in common, our fondness of surveys. So from the pre-webinar survey, I know that you're looking for tips on making presentations engaging and interesting, trying to get new stuff, finding out how presentations are made from an Australian cultural perspective and how they can connect, how to make powerful presentations, and how to work on your layout and delivery. So we'll cover a fair few chunks of those areas, and what we don't, we can do in follow-ups. As we get started, let's find out a bit more about you. I want you to look at the right-hand side of your screen right now, and you'll see in areas where there's some polls. If you could click on those now, just for us to get a feel of who's here and the sort of workshops or presentations that you do. So anybody that hasn't had a chance to do that, if you can do that now, and thanks for people that have, you're obviously in the advanced class. And we can see at the moment from that pretty much everyone here is used to doing presentations at smaller workshops or seminars. So that's good to know. So we're looking towards getting us ready to do some bigger ones. Okay, stick with me as we work through technology. I'm going to do another poll now, which will help us understand how often you do presentations. So I'm just putting that onto the screen now, hitting start. And so the question is, how many presentations did you do over the last 3 years? Ooh, but somebody who's very popular there. Got a mix of people have done 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10. So looking at the data coming in, and this is classic real-time data, is that we're seeing that most people have been doing at least 5 presentations over the last 3 years, and some have even done up to 10. So I've got some pretty popular people out there. Good news. Okay, as we set up, just a reminder, if you could, I know that you're really busy at the moment, you've got plenty happening and that you're good at multitasking, but if you could close all the programs and apps that you've got going on your computer at the moment, that's just going to make it help in terms of having quicker download times, less fuzziness, and making sure that everything runs smoothly. Brilliant. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll have a break for questions at the halfway mark. And if you could also please just focus on grabbing one thing and applying it from today's webinar. So just look for one thing that you haven't already got a hold of and make sure that you really become au fait with that. And if you can do that, then to me it's been a successful presentation. So let's jump in and share what I've learned and applied since that near-death-ish experience in Gascoyne Junction. Firstly, in our number one step, I want us to think about understanding our behavioural style. So it's important for us to know what pushes our buttons. Importantly, we need to understand what might push the buttons of the people in our audience. Let me explain. I want you to think about your presentation right now, the one you've got coming up. There are 4 behavioural elements that it should encompass. The first one is credibility. Does it have the relevant facts and proof? Second is creativity. Will it keep people engaged? Thirdly, think about its structure. Does it move in a logical sequence? And fourthly, is there a human element? Can you connect with people? So let's go a bit deeper on that. For people who've signed up to the coaching program for the conference, you'll be getting a copy of the Click Colours card soon, and these will help explain or give a bit of background to the 4 predominant behavioural styles that we have that we use when we're interacting with people. We generally draw on all 4 of them, but there's one which is more dominant or one that we're more comfortable with compared to the others. And there's no right or wrong, it just is what it is. So the first one I mentioned was about credibility, and this appeals to the needs of the analyzer style. So the analyzer style of person, they want you to explain the logic and back it up with statistics and research. And I reckon in this audience, this is what you guys are going to be right on top of. Another style is what's called the safekeeper style. They're looking for structure. They want you to be clear, organised, and punctual with your presentation. They want you to take into account possible risks and also have the logical structure. So being punctual, make sure you've timed out your presentation. It's nothing worse sitting in the audience and hearing somebody say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to rush through these last few slides because I didn't realise how quickly time had gone." It's surprising that comment because time to me always goes at 1 second per second, but it may have changed. And take into account possible risks. So make sure that you're really clear on how to use any technology you're going to be using and have rehearsed that. And be ready for the worst thing that can possibly happen, especially if you're using slides, that it dies. So make sure you have plan C and D in place. Okay, back to the behavioural elements. The other style of person is what's called the player. They want things, these guys are a pain in the butt because I'm one of them. They want your presentation to be exciting and energetic for them. They want it to be creative. And I'm going to use the F-bomb here right from the start, so be ready for it. They want it to be fun. Can you believe it? They're very needy people. And finally, there is the carer style. They want you to be friendly and genuine. They want you to be yourself. And they're interested in finding out a bit more about yourself. I think maybe they're closet stalkers, but they pretend to be nice people. And please remember to express, they want you to express how you feel about something. They want your opinion about something. So they want to know more about you. The key message here, in making sure you understand your behavioural style, is to incorporate these styles and incorporate an element of each into your presentation. Be really clear on what your preferred style is and make sure that you're not designing your presentation for your preferred style. So if you're somebody who's strongly analytic, don't clog your presentation up full of stats and research. You're going to have some other elements in there to appeal to other people with different styles. Okay, moving on. Knowing your audience. So during this design phase, you need to ensure that your design is congruent with their traits and needs. So we just talked about those 4 styles then. One of the challenges is if you don't know your audience, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle to connect with them. And if you can't connect with them, they won't be too receptive to the messages you're trying to get across. So try to do whatever you can to get some data and understanding on them. Find out a bit about their age group, their experience with the topic, and some of their concerns. So I've done this through having that pre-webinar survey I was able to put into the system, and then running those first 2 polls to get a bit of better understanding of who's here today. The interesting part I've been reading about is we need to actually understand what the key concerns of the audience are that directly relate to the topic, as well as the key concerns that are not directly related to the topic. So what do I mean by this? Here's an example. A client I recently worked with wanted to understand whether or not the agricultural industry here in Western Australia was willing to increase their contribution for control of a specific declared weed. They make contributions through a levy. The survey work of the client showed that most people under 35, this is young people, didn't want to make a contribution and didn't want to increase their contribution. People over 35, they were in favour of retaining and increasing the levy. So this actually this talks about the key concerns that aren't directly related to the topic. And those concerns are that many of the under 35s were still building their equity in their businesses. They'd been hit hard by a run of tough seasons, so they were in survival mode. So the survey work helped to uncover their key concerns directly related to the topic. They didn't want to contribute more, but also going a bit deeper, they were able to understand where these guys were coming from. So then they could tailor any presentations in line with this to show that they knew the challenges being faced and any future-based benefits of retaining the levy and how they could pitch that to these guys under 35. So just be clear on your audience, their concerns, whether they be direct or indirect to the topic. Next step, and this is where I really want to spend a lot of time on. So brace yourselves, I hope you got a good cup of coffee. It's about developing the structure of your presentation. And right from the get-go, I want you to be really clear on the purpose of your presentation. So to be clear on the overall aim of what you're trying to achieve. Then think about what are the outcomes. And finally, when you've done all your planning, start on the presentation itself in terms of the slides. Because I think far too often people start with banging out the slides and doing their presentation as they go. And to me, I reckon it's completely the wrong way to do it. So let's use an example here on what I mean. I want to talk about a presentation that's on the list for AFAC 15, and it's entitled The Future of Non-Traditional Emergency Volunteering. What will it look like and how can it work? To me, the purpose of that presentation is to highlight the need to shift from our current model of volunteering. I reckon the outcomes for this presentation are that the audience understands that the current volunteering model can only last for the next 10 to 20 years, that the audience considers the volunteering models that they currently rely on, and that they walk away knowing the first steps in moving to a non-traditional volunteering model. So that's what I see as the purpose and outcomes. The other thing you need to get clear when you're doing the design work is to be really clear on what is the key message that you want the audience to understand and walk away with. For something, and that is the key message you want them to remember 30 minutes, 3 hours, or even 3 days after your presentation. And to me, in this example, I reckon the key message is that the current volunteering model can only last for the next 10 or so years and needs to change. You also need to have a call to action in your presentation. And that's the one thing you want people to do as a result of coming and listening to you. So to me, in this case, I reckon the call to action is for people to, the audience members to review their current model of volunteering and identifying what needs to change. That's what I reckon the call to action is there. So make sure you have those elements in place. The next part is about designing the chunks of your presentation. And by chunks, I usually go and look at a presentation in terms of 3 elements, which is the what, the so what, and the now what. And for each of those elements, I split them down. And I think the what should be about 10% of your presentation. And what I mean by that is about the methodology, what you did, how you did it. And it's a common mistake I see. I've been to a lot of technical symposiums and conferences, and a lot of people spend too much time telling us what they did and how they did it. And they don't. And what people have really come to find out is, so what does this mean? And now what can I do with it? So people are coming looking for solutions. They're not looking to hear about the question being repeated again. So spend 10% on what, 60% on so what, in terms of so what does this mean to me, then 30% on now what. What do you want people to do next? What are the next steps? You get those in place, you'll be flying along. Now I've got some time for questions here. So I'm going to move over to the chat room, click on that. And if you can see on the right-hand side of your screens, there should be an area that you can write your message. So if you can please type in any questions you've got at the moment, and then I'll take a sip of water to keep you going. So please type away. Awkward silence. All right, seems that we're pretty comfortable with the way we're going at the moment. But remember to throw in any questions you have as we go, and we'll also have time for questions when we come back at the end of the webinar. So I'll just get us back on the screen. Multitasking, man doing 2 things at once. I'm a wonder of modern science. So next thing, I'm going into darker territory here, into unknown waters, and that is to use a story to build connection. And right now, I'm guessing you're thinking, this is a serious crowd. They're scientists and emergency management experts. They're not here to listen to stories. No way. Well, I'm not asking for a Kardashian or MasterChef style expose. I don't want you to break down in tears on stage talking about the challenges and how hard it is for you to be there. All you need to do is think of an effective way to connect your work or message with their world so that it sticks with them and relates back to their world. So it can be either your story or that of someone central to your key message. So let's take this. We'll go back to the previous example from the conference with that presentation about non-traditional volunteering. The connection I would make if I was making this presentation is the Queensland floods of a few years ago, the ones that went through the Lockyer Valley and hit Brisbane. Of course, the big news when they hit a capital city. Can you imagine all the stories that would have come out of there that relate to non-traditional volunteering, and how 1 or 2 of those stories could really help drive home the messages? Just imagine too, for a moment, that if we had to rely solely on the SES to respond to all those emergency calls, imagine how utterly overwhelmed they would have been. And without having non-traditional volunteers step in, what the end result would have been. And there's really strong imagery from this. When we saw the imagery of the former PM, Kevin Rudd, trudging through flooded streets to help stricken neighbours. It doesn't get more non-traditional than that, than a former Prime Minister becoming a non-traditional volunteer all of a sudden and helping out. So my suggestion is that you can use stories in a number of ways. You can use them to connect with the topic, like that one, or you can talk about your qualification to speak on the topic. And that's what I did at the start of the webinar today. You can use connection through location in terms of where you are at the time and your connection to that, or through a recent experience. What's a recent experience you've had that connects to the topic or to the audience? And a quick tip on using stories is that stories are more effective when they're told in the present tense, because when you tell them in the past tense, you're retelling the story, so it stays as your story. But in the present tense, you're reliving that story, so it becomes our story, a story of me, you, and the audience. So it's a shared experience. And that builds a much stronger connection. So speaking of connection, let's talk about this techno word of incorporating perceptual modalities. What does that mean in English? Well, it means thinking about the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning preferences of people in the audience. We all have a mix of each, but one is more preferential to the other for some of us. Some of us will have a strong visual style. So we learn by seeing and watching things. So if these people in your audience, you need to use colour to highlight important points in your presentation. You also need language that is visual language, and to illustrate your ideas in visual or picture-based language. If you were working with people who are involved in controlled burns, but you weren't out on site, you could say, I want you now to picture yourself at the scene of that controlled burn that we've just been talking about. And at the moment, and now I want you to picture yourself at the time that things start to get out of hand. So people can really put themselves back into that space straight away. And anyone who's in an audience when you're talking about a controlled burn can put themselves into that situation, start imagining what might happen. I do a lot of work with farming businesses in strategic planning and that sort of area. And we're trying to get farmers to do visioning, which is not an easy gig. So one of the ways we do that is by talking them through it using visual language. So we'd use something like, if you can just now picture yourself on your front veranda in 5 years' time. Look back into the house and think of who's still there and who's not. Look out to your surrounding paddocks and look at the changes and improvements you've made over the last 5 years. Now walk down into the hall into your office. Log onto your computer and look at your profit and loss statement. What is it telling you now? Think about the calls you've had your accountant and the changes you've made. So this is all very visual language to help get people into that mode of a future-based scenario. You'll also have people who are strongly auditory style in your audience. So using stories works with them. Verbal analogies works well with them to demonstrate key points. And use language that appeals to them. If you want to make a key point, you could say something now like, I want you to listen carefully. Or if you hear this, then you'll know. So it's really talking about that listening style that works for them. And if you have the opportunity, provide ample time for questions and discussion as part of your presentation or workshop, because this is how these guys can really process information and learn. And finally, we've got the kinesthetic style learners. They're all about hands-on action-based, which can be a real challenge if you're doing a straight-up presentation. So make it clear to them when you're moving from one presentation to the next, or one section, and try and even encourage a brief stretch for people if that's possible, either before your presentation, or if it's going over quite a long time, have it during the presentation. If you have the opportunity, move to different sections of the room or different sections of the stage when presenting, and let people know that you're going to provide them with notes at the end of the presentation so they can focus on you rather than trying to take notes. So let's move on. So we've done a lot of work about the preliminary design work now. Now we're going to get down to the point of slide designs. Okay, so the slide design here you can see in front of you, they've all been pretty simple, but they're not simplistic. I'm trying to, I guess, demonstrate what I'd like to see. And remember, in your slides, we're trying to focus on the so what in the content of your slides. This webinar is more instructional, so to be honest, it's been more about the what style of things. However, it's to get your message across, it's probably more valuable for people to understand the so what information in your slides because that answers the question for them. And generally that's what people are coming along to your presentations for, to have that question answered. So the more work you can help them with on doing that, the better off they are. In terms of your slide layout, keep it simple, minimise the amount of information there, and have clear images that are congruent with your message in large font. So you've probably heard of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book series and the guy Guy Kawasaki that developed them. He's a legend speaker. And no matter what you think of him, he had a really good formula for helping us with presentations. And that was a 10-20-30 formula. I'll repeat that again. The 10-20-30 formula. So he said it's 10 slides for a 20-minute presentation with a 30-point font minimum. Whatever font you use, the test is it has to be seen from the back of the room. A cardinal sin of presentations, in addition to saying, sorry, I'm going to have to rush through these slides, is saying, sorry, I know you can't see this. If you're using that, if you ever have to use that sentence in a presentation, just cut that slide right from the get-go, or be prepared to have people like me throw chairs from the back of the room. Yeah, so I'm tough, hard taskmaster. Let's talk about incorporating data into your slides. My guess is that that's a fair bit of the content you'll be using. In doing that, make sure you only have one chart or one graph per slide, just so people can really focus on what the information is you're trying to put in there. In putting up that chart or graph, think about what's the key part of information you really want people to understand, and make sure that's in a strongly contrasting colour compared to all the other bits of information or data. Try and avoid tables if you can. They're a lot of mental work for people. They really have to work hard to go through them. If you absolutely have to put in tables, try and use them for qualitative data and have either a 2x2 or 3x3 format. Anything beyond that is just too much information for people to try and process whilst you're talking. So think about using, and I've mentioned this in the guide, you think about how you can use infographics instead. This whole presentation you're seeing has been designed using infographics and just split up into chunks. And the software I use for that is called PictoChart. And I've got a reference for that in the guide as well. That's PIKTOCHART. Go to pictochart.com, and it's really simple to use. Even a troglodyte like me can sort it out. The other thing is to keep remembering when you're designing your slides that people are there to listen to you. So you want to give them every chance to focus on you and hear your message. Remember, you're the number one at that time. So use slides to embed your message, not to be the message. We're nearly there, guys, so stick with me. I know some of you are probably getting hungry, getting towards lunchtime, so you're doing well. The final step is to rehearse. Now, I understand that doing presentations is only a small part of your role, and you've got plenty of other things to be doing. But remember, once you get it right, you'll have lots of confidence to build on. So my tips are to get resourced and get some video footage of you practicing your presentation. And make sure when you're doing your practice run that I think it's worthwhile to do it not aloud, if there's a word for that, and just run through it in your mind. And then have it typed out so you're really clear on what you're going to say. And then the next step is to do the rehearsal. So you can actually pretty much do the presentation from go to woe with some simple prompts to keep you on track. So when it comes to the crunch, use video, do it aloud, and do it standing up if that's how you're going to do your presentation. If you can, try and find a room that's similar to the area that you'll be doing your final presentation in, so you've got a good understanding of how the sound works and the layout of the room and where you need to be looking throughout the presentation. As a guide, we typically speak at about 150 words per minute. In a presentation, we need to slow it down to about 125 words per minute. Make sure you try and get feedback and changes from people whose presentations you've seen and I think are good. It's worth getting feedback from your peers, but if they're crap at presentations or don't know what they're talking about, that's not going to help you. So get it from the people who know. And above all, remember the famous Boris Becker quote. He's a legend tennis player of the 70s. And in one tournament, he got an absolute belting and lost 3-0. And the press were giving him absolute shellacking afterwards. And he just said, well, nobody died out there, man. So there you go. Just to summarise, and we'll go back to a few questions because we've got a couple more coming up there. Thanks, guys. And please start typing away questions now so we can jump through them. I've got one from Lawrence and one from Michael, so thank you. So in summary, make sure you start out by understanding yourself and your audience, and that you're doing your presentation to your audience and not to you. Make sure you're really clear on your purpose and outcomes you want to deliver, and that you have a very clear takeaway key message for people, and that you have your call to action quite clear that you want them to go and do afterwards. And if you signed up for the speaker coaching program, just check that out with AFAC. What you'll get from that is I'll review the draft outline of your presentation, then I'll review the slide version, and then we can hook up and do an online review of your practice session via Skype, or I've got a couple of other SlideShare programs we can use for that. Once you've done your presentation in person, in real time, we'll do a follow-up coaching call to debrief that. And I'm also throwing in a complimentary review of your next presentation as a bonus. So when you've done this one and ready to go with your next one, we can give it a go. So feel free to get in touch with me. There's my contact details there, and we can follow up from there. So in terms of some questions there, please type away now if you've got further questions. Lawrence asked that there might be a question for AFAC about profiling their attendees. I'll get in touch with the AFAC people to find out if they can provide us with that kind of information to help you along. It'd certainly be worthwhile finding out from your own colleagues who's going and what some of the things they're looking for from attending the conference. What percentage of the presentation should be left for questions? That's a great question from Michael. I would leave at least 10%. Yeah, definitely at least 10% for questions if you can. So if you're doing a 20-minute presentation, definitely at least 2 minutes to 5 minutes. That really helps, as I said before, the auditory style people, and helps you to reinforce some of the key messages and the call to action. So that's it, folks. Again, if you've got any questions, please type them in and we can answer them now. And there'll also be a replay of this webinar provided to you in a few hours' time once it's uploaded onto YouTube. And for any colleagues that missed it, I'll be providing a link so they can grab that as well. So thank you very much for your time and your patience today, and sticking with it right on the bell of lunch. Really appreciate your patience with that, and certainly happy to answer any questions in the future. Just drop me an email or give me a call, and certainly looking forward to working with you to make sure you've got a really confident, well-presented presentation at your next conference and event. That's it for now. Thanks for your time, folks. Hooroo.